back to Psychedelics today. I am joined by Lyle Maxson from Entheo Digital. How you doing today, Lyle?
Great. Good to be here.
Yeah, really excited to have you on. And we were just talking Topanga Canyon. It's like legendary in psychedelic spaces. How is it like coherent still? Like, did people have to leave because of the fires recently?
You know, I had my very first fire evacuation, in my lifetime, which was intense. That was last summer,
Mm-hmm.
but there was there was no like structural damage, and apparently it was actually really good for the canyon because there was 50 or 60-year-old brush, that was filled with all sorts of flammable oils that ended up burning. But yeah, I mean, outside of that, I've been here for 3 years. I think that some of my friends that have been here longer, I don't think they've ever had to do fire evacuation. So we've been very blessed. They've happened in Malibu, which is just north of us. But yeah, man, the community's strong. It's amazing. I mean, they say that there's only like 6,000 people that live here, but I find that hard to believe because there is so many magical humans.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's a very special spot to be. 10 minutes from the beach and about 15 minutes from Santa Monica. But then still, we have a 3-acre farmhouse, and it feels like we're in the middle of the woods.
It's incredible. Yeah. I was just in Santa Monica a couple weeks ago, and I really wanted to make it work. We just couldn't, like timing wise, make it work. But next time, I'll come up and visit.
Nice. Yes. Happy to have you. You can shoot some archery.
It'd be lovely. Lovely. I love shooting arrows. So let's dig in. So before we dig into you, can you give us like a really high level on what is Entheo Digital?
Yeah, of course. So Entheo Digital is a digital therapeutics company focused on using VR to stimulate parts of the brain that basically give you a psychedelic effect. So we've called it the first ever technodelic. And we're very much focused currently on working with psychedelic therapists as a priming tool and as an integration tool. And basically integrating it throughout the protocol. But it is a first of its kind of digital medicine, and it's biofeedback driven. The product is called SoundSelf, and you're using your voice and vocal intonations throughout the entire experience, which essentially creates a biofeedback from the audio, the visual, and haptics, which is a vibration or a kinesthetic response. And so it drops you very, very deep into a meditative state very quickly. And one of the big things that we've been really focused on is, unlike most wellness technologies that activate theta brainwaves, which this also does, we are very, very uniquely positioned where we're activating gamma brainwaves. And gamma is typically only really associated with peak performers in flow state or somebody on a large dose of psychedelics. So if we're able to activate gamma in that way, there's all sorts of very interesting things that could come from that, from recalling memories from your psychedelic session that happened days, weeks, or months beforehand, which we hear people do often, to a variety of indications and things that we're now pursuing research on.
I love it. So now let's talk about you, and then we'll do a kind of a deep dive here into what's going on with Entheo Digital. So how did you kind of first start finding out or becoming interested in this psychedelic, if not neurohacker space? I assume those are both similar influences.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, good question. So the biohacking, neurohacking technology I got into probably in 2010, right when I started college. And I initially got turned on to float spas and deprivation tanks. And at the float spa, they had things like oxygen bars or like these Himalayan salt caves where they literally like blow salt through the air. And that kind of just got my wheels spinning around what's possible with this technology. And then obviously having some very deep experiences where it just felt kind of like a shortcut to these altered states that then could become integrated into my life and used as tools without the need of the technology. And yeah, at that time, I had started a creative agency focused on bringing activations to music festivals. So they were essentially, initially it was a sponsorship agency. So I was bringing in what I would call conscious brands. So instead of like a Pepsi or a Red Bull, I would bring in like a True Rest Float Spa or a organic food company. And my only requirement for them was that they would have to create some sort of experience at the music festival in order to sponsor. So that became me essentially showing up to these big mainstream music festivals, really primarily EDM focused, with 30 to 100,000 people, and setting up these experiences for them, whether it's yoga tents or oxygen bars or like vibrating beds with meditation software or whatever it was. And that kind of spiraled into the festivals enjoying these experiences and the fans enjoying them so much that they actually didn't want me to bring in sponsorship anymore. They just wanted to give me a budget to produce these things. So then I traveled around the world producing these activations at I don't know, at some point it was like 30 music festivals a year. So I was doing like 2 or 3 a month. And
that's incredible.
So yeah, so then there was this, the activation that basically came out of it was called the Quantum Lounge, which was essentially a combination of biohacking, neurohacking technology, AR, VR, and it was designed in kind of this theatrical performance space. So it'd be like in the VIP of Beyond Wonderland, which is one of Insomniac's big events, and you would step in and there'd be like these gorgeous performers that would be plugging you into different technologies along with like the scientists that actually created them. So basically the feeling was, if you were to step onto an alien ship, what would the hospital be like on the ship? So there was, there was like the entertainment side, but then there was also like the deep meditative side. And then things like, I brought in, a variety of pieces of technology that were hundreds of thousands of dollars that we would bring in and set up and hope that, people didn't throw up on, or, it's like a mixed bag at a music festival. But I just got so passionate about what was possible and giving people a glimpse of, not only like their higher self and what's possible within their own inner work, but also the tools that are out there to take them there. So, and that was kind of what shifted me into getting into the virtual reality industry. Was a lot of this technology was extremely expensive. And with VR, it's $30 software. And I saw the proliferation of VR headsets and how they were getting cheaper and cheaper, and the app store that was developing in the headset, and the fact that you could literally spend $30 and have a transformative experience that was similar to $100,000 device that you have to fly in from Utah or whatever we were sourcing it from. So that was what really inspired me. And I thought, okay, well, if there's the reason that I was even in music festivals was I felt like it could make an impact to 100,000 kids that were there walking through, young, malleable souls that were looking kind of for their higher purpose, and feeling a lot of that at music festivals when you're in this ecstatic state, typically on some sort of psychedelic in a giant crowd. But there wasn't any really meaning at the festival outside of that connection. And a lot of people couldn't find that either. So like to bring basically a sanctuary into these events. But then when I saw the VR software, I was like, okay, it could go from 100,000 people to maybe 100 million people with this type of impact at scale. And that was basically what transitioned me in about 2017 from music festivals to VR.
Huh. Very cool.
Sorry, that was a lot there.
Like, no, there's so much. And I love it. So, obviously there's, psychedelics at music festivals. Like, you're seeing a lot of these people have these big experiences, and probably often you're seeing the people that are just at every festival, not necessarily living the most healthy way, but you're seeing like there's optimism here. Like, there is an upside. We can like turn this into like a really positive thing for the world, maybe. Because they're open, interested, and want to help people often. That's what they're up to. And I think it's a really cool angle. You did say something about $100,000 machine. I'm wondering if it was like the, what is this thing called? The like 40 years of Zen that Dave Asprey used to talk about a lot. Is that similar?
I haven't experimented with that. I know that 40 years of Zen, I think you actually have to fly to Canada to do the whole treatment. But this one was called a Theta Chamber. And the company is called Theta
Mm.
Wellness, and they're based out of Utah. They're a bunch of like alien, hackers and developers creating very interesting light vibration, electromagnetic frequency type of technology. Actually, it's funny you mentioned Dave because he has the Upgrade Labs biohacking center here in Santa Monica, and he has actually one of the Theta Chambers, which I was really
Mm.
surprised about because typically biohacking centers try to stay away from kind of the woo-woo technology, but I think the Theta Chamber has been proven enough to induce theta brainwaves very quickly that it was a sell for Dave and Upgrade. Um, but yeah, I mean, we
Interesting.
brought those in. I've brought in float tanks, literally, where we had to bring like 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt loaded up into a semi truck into a music festival in the middle of nowhere, and then try
Oh
to
my
get
God.
people to shower before they get in, and then shower all the salt off afterwards. In the middle of yeah, it was just yeah, I really went for it, man. But I learned so much from curating those things and talking to all the inventors and scientists behind it that that really got my wheels turning about what I wanted to create.
Yeah, that's super interesting. Um, and this is years ago, right? So
Hmm.
technology must have come a long way since then. Um, but really, like what I'm seeing in your business's thesis is like we can use technology to not only have similar experiences to psychedelics and probably have a lot of helpful benefits, but also use these tools and technologies to do prep and post care. Um,
Hmm.
but I'm kind of wondering if you can like talk about maybe let's talk about the prep side first. Like, how can you use these interesting technologies to prepare for big psychedelic sessions?
Yeah, I mean the analogy that I use often is like especially living in LA, if you're trying to drive to a yoga class, you're usually more stressed out by the time you get there than if you hadn't have left your house at all. So and I feel like that's the case with a lot of I mean therapy work in general, whether it's psychedelics or not. You could have
Yeah,
a onboarding call with somebody the day before, but you have no idea what's happening to them the 24 hours leading up to them actually coming into your clinic. So
that's a good
I
point.
think the big focus around the priming is how do we have reliable, very consistent treatment processes with being able to drop people into a very deep surrender, meditative, introspective state prior to them actually going into a therapeutic process. So that's like really the focus is, just like bringing you here and into your body before you actually go into the session.
Mm.
And I think that that's really overlooked a lot of times. And I mean, I know it too when I go into either psychedelic therapy or I've been doing EMDR therapy as well. Yeah, a lot of times the night before I had gotten in an argument with my girlfriend or whatever it is, and I just do not feel very willing to be open and vulnerable or excited or about the session ahead. So it would be really great if my therapist had a tool like SoundSelf that I could use in her office as soon as I get out of the crazy LA traffic. To really be involved.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. Like, there's so many variables we can control, but it's so hard to. So having a cool framework, leveraging tech to do that is like really beneficial, I think. So do we? I clearly, if I'm gonna consume or have some sort of intentional session, I would prefer not to be super stressed out beforehand. I've been super stressed going into some, and it's not been the best. I'm sure I learned plenty. In fact, I definitely learned plenty. But it's what is there a benefit like in your mind to like having people be a lot more calm going in?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, I mean, just from my own personal experience, and of course, so our company Entheo, we are now doing a lot of research. That's a big focus for us this year. So we'll find out pretty quickly, what the true benefits of this are. But anecdotally, I mean, yeah, from personal experience, I've had a lot of times where I show up, and if I'm in the right state, I could go very deep very quickly. Whether it's um, with psychedelics specifically, that does happen, where there's just not a lot of resistance, and there's not like the small self or the ego trying to kind of push up against me surrendering.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's just kind of like having a deeper surrender response that, yeah, that really helps for me.
Mm. Interesting. Cool. And maybe like in terms of simulating an experience, like this is kind of like a really awkward question, right? Like, can we simulate psychedelic experiences? I think on one hand, yes, on one hand, no. But how do you kind of look at that, and like how can that be used to help people feel a little bit more comfortable going in?
Yeah. I mean, that's you touch on a good point as well, which we do talk a lot about, priming for first time anxiety. And it's so funny because every time I say first time anxiety, I just like chuckle within myself, because like regardless of how many times you've done psychedelics, there's always a little bit of anxiety, at least for me, prior to going in. So I think first time, it's kind of every time, but so there's that aspect for sure, and then there's also, we continue to look at active duty military, first responders, people that are on SSRIs, a variety of cultural indications that are, that they're staying away actively from psychedelics, or the variety of countries where psychedelics are one of the more illegal things that you could possibly do, like just below murdering somebody,
Yeah,
so
right. Well,
yeah, I
including
mean,
the
that's
United States.
yeah. So that's a huge addressable market that doesn't have access to psychedelic medicine or altered states in general. Like there is
Mm.
things like holotropic breath work, but that's a lot of effort. And, if there's one thing I've learned about working in, creating technology for the mainstream, is that people want things to be instantly gratifying, highly enjoyable, super accessible. I think those are kind of the three key pillars of why we're all addicted to fast food and watching, sports games. Um, but you could tell I don't watch sports games based off of how I just said that. I was like, should I say a specific sport? Whatever, sports games. But yeah, so that's a big thing for us, is like, I don't want this to ever replace the psychedelic world, but I do feel like there is a very strong use case for it in a variety of settings where it's just not possible. And of course, then I could go down the rabbit hole of, I think that in the next 20 or 30 years, there will be a combination of, like, what we're doing is vagus nerve stimulation mixed with vibrational technology, mixed with brainwave entrainment with light therapy. But I think that eventually you'll start to combine light, frequency, vibration, electromagnetics, to the point where you could actually activate DMT inside of your brain without having to use it from an external source. So, like, literally using
Interesting.
technology to activate the psychedelics inside of your own body. I think we will get to that place, and that will be very interesting.
Do you have some projects going to investigate that?
I love how serious
I
you
assume
asked it.
yes.
Um, I mean, it's more of a thought experiment at this point, but yeah, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there is some interesting things that I've talked about, with my other business, which is a VR education platform. My co-founder is, Nick Janicki, who was kind of a pioneer in the resurgence of float spas and deprivation tanks. He owns True Rest, which has, over 100 locations now across the U.S. And him and I have definitely gone deep with what we could do inside of a float tank, because I think that it is kind of a missing link. You kind of add all these different elements. What I've been branding or calling the new elements. Like there's the primal four, which is earth, wind, fire, and air, or and water. But then you look at, like, what is kind of the evolved version of that, and it would be light, frequency,
Mm.
vibration, electromagnetics. So then you look at something like a float tank, and you're inside of a giant crystal, is what it is. Like there's 1,000 pounds of Epsom salt inside of water. So you're in like this malleable crystal that's basically a conductor for all of these different elements. So I think that you could, stimulate the water that you're laying in to an extent with a variety of frequencies that are linked up, that could create something like that, like a natural DMT release. And I will say that one of the more exciting projects that I worked on, kind of still in my music festival days, was Alex and Allison Gray were planning a fundraiser for the temple that they're building in upstate New York. And we were doing an event to basically prepare a bunch of the organizers for the fundraiser. So it was like the event to leading up to the event. And I decided to bring in this company that has a bunch of haptic, basically they look like wrestling mats. Like they just embedded subwoofers into a bunch of wrestling mats, but it made a dance floor. And then there's this incredible inventor named Don Estes, which a lot of people should check out. He's like one of the OG biohacker technologists. And he created this light therapy machine that's 1,000,000 lumens of light. It literally has to be plugged in like in 6 different outlets just to like power this thing. And instead of it being like light therapy glasses where you close your eyes and it's for one person, or even there's like Pandora's Star, which is for 4 or 5 people, this could theoretically do light therapy for like hundreds of people at once. And it essentially is one giant light that could reflect off of like a white surface, and then that is hitting everyone at the same time. So I brought him in with that light, and then I brought in a like silent disco company to do the sound, and then like a bunch of musicians and like a guided meditation teacher. So essentially the beds, the vibration of the mats synced up with the vibration of the music, and then also with the actual frequency strobe of the light. And so it was like 40 people in the spaceship where there was 3 different, pieces of technology that were all matched the exact same frequency. And I think if you added electromagnetics to that, because then the electromagnetic field would be oscillating at the same frequency, I think that's where you might have the full DMT blast off. But I haven't tried it yet.
Holy hell. Well, I'm in. Count me in. This is fascinating. I met this person a while back, like probably 5 years ago in Boulder. They're hardcore Tibetan Buddhist and neuroscientist, and you bump into these people that are a little too smart sometimes. I'm sure you know the type. You're like, all right, let's see what you can do with that. But this person had a whole formula worked out for like this kind of meditation and this kind of diet will trigger more endogenous DMT to the point where you can experience it. All the formulas worked out. I'm like, this is incredible. But I didn't know what to do with it, and it hasn't really gone anywhere as far as I know. But yours seems quite practical, doable. It requires electricity and some equipment. Doesn't require being a monk, which is fine. Like monks should still do their thing. But yeah, well, that's really fascinating. I wonder. It'd be really interesting if there's like a long release DMT lozenge or something to like just up the DMT threshold just a little bit, right?
Nice. Yeah.
That's fascinating. You're not going to trip off of it, but perhaps there's something there. I don't know. That's fascinating, man. Well, I'm glad you're working on it. Like, the dancing, so people in the psychedelic space are often a little opinionated about the best ways to consume, where and how to consume. I tell them how I like to do it on the show, and they kind of call me a dummy. Like, you're a bad person. Not always, but once in a while I'm like, come on guys, this is part of what we do is go to festivals. It's fine. As a species, we like to be together in large groups like this. Elusis being one of those, right? So like, is there in your mind, like, so say this is a whole dance floor and we're doing this kind of thing, like, what kind of benefits would you see from that theoretically? Like, I think like there's a lot in my mind that I could kind of shotgun out there, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, from that experience, again, it's just like reaching these really incredible mental states. I mean, it's, a lot of times it feels very out of body. I mean, you feel very, very high and euphoric from the experience. And I mean, ultimately, I think you're just reaching like these new levels of awareness. Yeah, I mean, even with SoundSelf, there's people that get off the experience and say that they feel like they've just meditated in a monastery for 10 years, but it was a 10-minute session, so it's kind of like, what are we doing in order to, make that possible. And then the biggest thing for me is how do we not become reliant upon the technology? Because, I do have some really intelligent friends that are like, yeah, what you're doing with creating digital medicine is a holy grail type of project. But with that comes the reverse side, which is the addiction that we already have to computers is off the charts. But what happens when you could literally press play and get high at any moment? Would people ever get off of it? So that's a philosophical question, but I think we're actually going to butt up against that in the next few years as we continue to develop this technology. And that's why it's so important for me to understand that we have to not become reliant on it, and we have to actually learn real world skills through utilizing the technology that we could then be out in the middle of the forest without anything and come back to that and be able to meditate and drop in and do those things and hit those euphoric states. And even something like SoundSelf, you're toning the entire time. So you're stimulating your vagus nerve. You're doing one of the more ancient practices for humanity, period. And so then you could go out into the woods and you could just tone and om or chant or do mantras or whatever it is. And you've like really conditioned that in your brain as a important, skill to master. So I think that's a huge aspect of this that should be talked about more often.
Right. There's, this whole field, like, historically, there was a lot of kind of comparative religion stuff going on. Transpersonal psychology is kind of looking at, oh, cool, look what the Kabbalists do. Look what the Zen Buddhists can do. Look at, these fringe cases. And I find it really fascinating. So right now, we don't necessarily have that, right? It's like ayahuasca is the only thing that can make you have these experiences, when it's like, well, no, it's about the human body and different ways to manipulate it to do cool things. And, I had somewhere to go with this, but I lost the thread.
Well, I will say, I'm in full agreement with the fact that the human body is the most sophisticated piece of technology that will ever be. And yeah, that's really important to remember as we continue down this, singularity type experience. And I will, strongly say that I am not a transhumanist, and I do not believe that we should, merge completely with machines. I think that organic life has a very important place in our evolution. And as much as we could use technology as a tool instead of as a master, and really understand that I think that's the biggest narrative that people aren't really talking about is, there are like whistleblowers, and there are like the social dilemma type of documentaries, and we're talking about how awful it is for us, but we're not talking about the positive examples. And there are some really cool ones, including people like Adam Ghazali, who got the first ever FDA regulated video game for kids with ADHD. That happened in the summer of 2020, where literally kids now could get off of their Adderall by playing a video game on their phone. NeuroRacer, exactly. Yeah. Achille is the name of the company.
How cool is that?
I know. Adam's a friend too. He's incredible. But yeah, people, every time I share that with anyone, no one has any idea. So it's just really important for people to understand that there is benefits to using technology, and we have to get behind those companies, start using them and understanding what's possible, and that will help shape the future in the right direction.
Yeah. So where I was going with it was like this idea of like states and stages and tools. Like there's so many tools we can learn how to use to manipulate ourselves, and software can help quite a bit, hardware can help quite a bit. But if we just know how to know how to do a couple different meditations, like we can do some really interesting stuff all on our own without the tools, right? And I like your line there, like I personally like Adderall, but I don't necessarily think children should be on it while they're still developing. But, who am I to say that? I'm not a physician. But, some people actually, that some of my friends who had been on it for 10 years before they turned 18, they're like, yeah, it was actually really helpful for me. Like I learned a different way of being. But it was also like, I think there can be some problems that might come from that. Yeah. So, as usual, less drugs is usually better. But I think doctors typically think that way, but not always. Yeah.
Really?
So if I can
God,
have a
I don't know
tool,
what doctors you're seeing. My doctor's always trying to get me on every pharmaceutical imaginable.
uh,
But yeah, I think it's for me too. It's like really like the cultural implications of, and that's why like the big terminology that I'm really focused on is this transformative entertainment, and that's kind of the through line between music festivals, transformative festivals, and then something like VR and AR is that there has to be some sort of alternative to turning on a TV or popping a pharmaceutical, and there really isn't that right now. And the things that are very challenging to do, and you don't see instant benefits like having a daily yoga practice or sitting down and meditating for 30 minutes. So if we had something inside of our house that we could use, and it's actually as comparable to watching a sports game or playing a video game, but it's actually really good for you and you feel better when you're done as opposed to drained and worse. That is what's exciting to me. And like basically implementing that into the culture and not having it as this kind of like tool that you use when you're feeling bad, but it's actually like a complete alternative to your entertainment time that most people spend hours with every single day.
mm-hmm. Right. Absolutely. Yeah. So it's so easy to watch TV for 5 hours a night, but it's so hard to do yoga or meditate.
Mm.
It's, yeah, like how do we create this culture? Have you talked to Robbie Bent at all about his interesting project?
Yeah, I know Robbie really well. He's great.
Cool. It sounds like a really kind of complementary kind of culture. Because I think he's more
Totally.
interested in developing the culture of health um, than necessarily like, yeah, let's everybody do psychedelics all the time. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, which
Yeah,
I think
very
is helpful.
communal
Like,
focused. Yeah, he's a good sounding board for me because I came from the background of like the communal focused transformative experiences, but now I'm like very much in the silo of things like VR where they're more at home, or
mm-hmm,
in a therapist's office. But yeah, I mean, I think we're both very focused on like the gamification aspect, which is kind of I think the future of where all this stuff is going, and incentivizing and having people, what I say is like upgrading the real world avatar that is you. So everyone's so focused on upgrading their video game characters, and they'll spend hundreds of hours creating these fictional stats, including things like money and agility and physique. And it's so funny because those stats in real life are actually depleting as their stats are gaining in the virtual world typically. So how do we upgrade the real world avatar that is us? And that's, I think, a good through line too for Robbie and I.
I like that framing. But it makes a lot of sense, right? Like, how do we do this? And yeah. Hmm. So are you in touch with any kind of retreat centers or psychedelic companies right now? Like, and what does that look like for you?
Yeah. So we opened up a clinician beta with the newest version of SoundSelf, and we have about 50 clinicians signed up and using it currently. And essentially, our big ask from them is that they get on the phone with us an hour a month and tell us how they're using it in their protocols, from the technology itself to just implementing wellness technology in combination with psychedelics or their mental health practice. And that's helping with our research and then also informing the redesign of the product. So basically, all of their input is going right back into our development cycle. And we are planning on closing that very soon. And then in the next couple months, we'll be opening up more of an early access for the general public to sign up and download our software and start implementing it either within their practice or even at home.
That's super interesting. Um, so specifically clinicians, are you going after other wellness professionals at all?
Yeah. There's a variety of, I mean, like cranial sacral, acupuncture, biohacking centers, to a variety of individuals. Ideally, for research purposes, it's really good to have
Mm-hmm.
licensed clinicians. But honestly, we're so into doing this QA process that we'd love to hear from everybody that's using the product and the variety of use cases and what they like and don't like.
That's super cool. What kind of So say I'm like a chiropractor here in like the Alpine, Colorado zone. Like, would I be dedicating a whole room to it? Would I like, buy a whole, like, what does it look like gear wise and footprint wise?
Yeah, so it entirely depends. We typically like to say that it should be in a separate room with some
Mm-hmm.
privacy. Like it wouldn't be great to have it in a lobby or a communal space where you're trying to vocally tone. A lot of people are very insecure about their voice too, so you want to like give them space. Um, yeah, so you could either buy just the light therapy glasses that comes with like a lavalier mic, so that way we could get really good vocal feedback. Or you
It just
could
clips onto the shirt.
Yes, exactly. So
Yeah.
that's a really easy setup, and then you just download the software on your computer, and someone could just lay down on a couch or whatever it is. And then the larger setup is with an actual vibrating bed. So that has a variety of
Mm.
subwoofers embedded in the spine of the bed, and it essentially looks like a massage table. So that would be the footprint is essentially like a
Mm.
whatever it is 6.5 foot long by 3 foot wide, and so the bed adds the vibrational component to the experience, which is incredible. To feel your own voice, reverberate back to you is a very intense experience for most people.
That's super interesting. Um, we do this practice sometimes in our breathwork workshops where we actually like say our name 3 times and have it repeated back to us 3 times.
Mm.
And it's like, to me, it feels like this is kind of the solo version of that, maybe, where you're like, oh, this is actually me speaking or my vocal cords. It's like, that's fascinating, that feedback loop.
Mm.
Um, and what do you, so like, let's look out a few years. Like, what does this look like 4 years out? Or is that so far out technology wise that it's like hard to even go there?
Um, I mean, I could give you maybe like 18 months.
Sure.
I because yeah, I will go down like all the crazy rabbit holes if you go too far forward. But um, yeah, so we are transferring it back into VR. So the product initially started as tethered VR, which requires a very expensive gaming computer and very bulky setup. Then we transferred it over to light therapy, which is very easy for clinicians to use. It could just plug into any laptop. And now we're bringing it back to VR, but in a mobile VR headset, which is actually even cheaper than the light therapy goggles and doesn't require any computer. So that's the focus now. So in the next 18 months, it'll be ported into a Quest 2 or potentially a Quest 3 at that point, which is a mobile VR headset. And then it'll be ported into every mobile VR headset as Apple and a variety of other companies are building theirs now. So that'll essentially be a subscription version of the experience that people could download at home. And then we'll have the clinical side as well. What I'm excited about is we're also looking at integrating voice analysis AI. So that would essentially be that you could create. So Adam Ghazali, actually, who we mentioned around Akili and NeuroRacer, calls it a closed feedback loop system. So instead of you like right now when you tone into SoundSelf, you hear your voice feedback to you, and that's like very normal biofeedback. But what a closed feedback loop system is that the voice analysis of the AI would then pick up different stress indicators and things that are going on with you, potentially even physiologically, but definitely mentally. And then it will alter the experience for your state in the moment, and then dynamically change for that and remove you from that state without you even having to know how you're feeling. It will pick up how you're feeling and then change dynamically. So that's what I'm really excited about is the components of that, kind of working through this, through our development. And then ultimately there's a lot of conversations that we're having prior to starting this company. My business partner Robin and I had founded a publishing company focused on games for good in
Mm.
VR. And yeah, it's still running. It's doing really well. We moved our CFO into CEO, and he's been crushing it. It's called Andromeda Entertainment. But uh, yeah, a big focus for us was even in the publishing company is like, what is like if your listeners are familiar with Steam, which is I think they have like over 150 million PC gamers on this platform. It's the biggest game platform in the world. And what is this? So it's like a launcher essentially. So you could, a variety of third-party content lives on this platform, and you just need to, it's like the Netflix of video games for your computer. So what does that Netflix menu look like if it's a variety of digital medicine? So not only things like SoundSelf that are focused on anxiety, depression, and we're doing research now to find out what all those indications are. But then what if we did have an ADHD medicine on there? And so there's like kind of this issue right now within the digital medicine landscape where you have to buy specific hardware to just run one application. It's not streamlined. There's no central marketplace and singular technology where you could just click on whatever thing that you're wanting as far as, any sort of mental health issue. And instead of popping a pharmaceutical, you could literally just, download the experience. So we are talking a lot about what that looks like to create a marketplace that features all those medicines.
That's incredible. Wow. Huh. Yeah, I think another thing folks in the psychedelic space might not track closely is just technology directly. So have you read What Technology Does by Kevin Kelly?
I've read a lot of Kevin Kelly's work. I read Mirror World. I don't know if I've read that one, though.
I think I'll get the actual name of it. But, like things are always getting cheaper in technology. They start really expensive, $100,000 setup to bring to the desert. Now, as time progresses, 10, 12 years later, maybe you can get 80% of that with a Quest and some nice earbuds. Quest 2 and some earbuds, right? Well, that's the hardware portion. The software costs whatever it costs. Like it could be free, it could be $10,000, right? You don't know. But I love this idea. Especially encouraging people to use this immersive tech to be healthier. Like if we can use it really well to get people doing meditation or something approximating it, hell yeah, like all day long.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure this tech way better than I do, but there's going to be so many applications and it could be so democratized. I hate to say this guy's name in a positive light, but years and years ago, Peter Thiel was on the Tim Ferriss show talking about some really fascinating stuff. This equipment could theoretically democratize like top tier Ivy level ed worldwide. Like it's insane what could be happening. And how smart people could be with the kind of education that will be available in a few years, like custom tailored bots to like totally help you with your deficiencies and, just move you towards like college level ed for $2,000.
Oh, totally.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, and they say, that the education is only as valuable as the professor that's teaching it. So yeah, I mean, with something like GPT-3, which is OpenAI's current platform, I have friends that are already getting to the point where they could type in the parameters around Socrates or Einstein or Winston Churchill, and then literally type in the parameters of what setting that they're in. So like Winston Churchill is in the war room as Germany is dropping bombs on England, and he's teaching about resilience. What does that look like? Where you could literally set parameters and have an open dialogue where your talk turns into text and is instantly transcribed back to the AI. And now you're literally in a classroom with a custom Winston Churchill teacher for you, on a specific subject. That's definitely where we're going. And that will be inside of VR. And once that happens, then everyone will be really benefiting from that, I'm sure.
Right. It's fascinating because a lot of people are going to be horrified to see that coming. But the idea is, not to totally make that their environment because, you need normal proprioception with the real world. So it's like, what's the healthy balance between like, teacher time, socialization and that. And like, there's some really interesting experimentation that'll happen. Some of it's going to be not pretty. Some of it's going to be amazing. And this is kind of just how it happens. The book is called What Technology Wants, by the way. Great one. Kevin Kelly. It's really worth it for those of you who are like, why is Joe always so excited about technology? Well, I worked in software for 20 years. Total tech nerd. But it's because I see the future. Like it's, it's coming. You know, people were really afraid of the automobile and trains. You know, humans aren't designed to be able to go 20 miles an hour on a train across the country. It's going to be disastrous. You know, kind of was, but also kind of just fine.
Yeah.
um, yeah. And, you know, I saw some really cool stuff about how like legacy cannabis genetics might be preserved through Web3 technology. It's like, hell yeah. Like
Mm.
Web3 is coming, whether you like it or not. Like, I don't know what to say about it exactly, other than it's going to really change a lot of how you interact with tech.
Yeah. Well, and that's a big thing for me too that I mention often is that, there's the technology train, like you said, it's coming. You can't stop it. It's a one-way track. Outside of a massive solar flare shutting down every piece of technology possible, which could happen. Outside of that, like the technology train is moving. So it's sad to me to see a lot of very capable, incredible, spiritually adept people that jump off the train and they're like, I don't want to be on this train. Like, this isn't going anywhere that I want. It's like, no, you need to rally and change the conductor. That's what you need to do. You need to galvanize yourself. You need to run through the carts of the train, and you need to change the person that's in control. So that's like a big thing for me. And again, I think it comes back to these positive examples and shifting from fear to inspiration of what is possible. Because you bring up like, yeah, it's going to be scary when you have an AI teacher, and it's like I was born in the early 90s, and like I was on Hooked on Phonics, which was an electronically driven program that got me, reading at a high level very young. So yeah, technology is always going to be there. And now kids are sitting on Zoom for hours a day. It would be much better if they could express themselves with full body language and have a sense of presence and eye contact inside of a virtual environment. Just it's not going to ever be better than the real world, but it's certainly going to be better than what we have now. So I think that's a big focus. And another thing that really inspires me is that right now, inside of the major marketplace, like the Netflix of VR, which is Facebook Meta's marketplace inside the mobile headset Quest, they have a little over 300 apps. So compared to the iOS store for your Apple app store, I don't know, was there 2, 3, 4 million apps on there? So it's very interesting. With 300 apps, you have basically the ability to get in on the ground floor right now and start to shift and shape the new computing system of, the new computer. So like, what does that look like? It's not only like the best storytelling device and will create all this empathy and, it'll have like all these biofeedback components, but it's literally the computer, the next computing system. So, yeah, what does it look like to get in on the ground floor? Like it'd be really hard to do that in movies or radio or the variety of mediums, TV shows, all of those things. Like they're already pretty much dominated by content that we don't really want or doesn't make us feel better when we watch it. But with VR, it's early enough to get in on the ground floor and create compelling alternatives to the zombie shooter games and the porn that will inevitably fill the device, and get people thinking about how to be an embodied avatar inside of a virtual world and do it for good instead of for escapism. So I think we have a very unique position to get involved early.
I had something amazing to ask, but your line about escapism short-circuited me. So escapism in technology and psychedelics are not always all that different, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you see how much time somebody would spend in World of Warcraft because their life wasn't too impressive, maybe, or they just loved the fantasy of it. Like, we can thank World of Warcraft for triggering Vitalik to start Ethereum. So we have that going. But, how many people wasted how many hours? If it's waste, I don't know if it's waste. But it's, they weren't building farms to heal the planet, right? They were fucking around in their basement, like playing video games, which is fine. But it's like, how can we inspire people to do what's needed to save the world?
Mm-hmm.
You got to scare them a little bit. One of my permaculture teachers, like, scare them just enough so that they can act. They're not too scared that they're paralyzed. But it's, we have to understand how scary this situation is. It's coming down the pipes, and you have to engage with reality. Smoking DMT all the time or drinking ayahuasca twice a week, like that stuff's not great to do all the time.
Yeah.
Because, is it building community? Is it making you happy, or are you helping make other people happy or healthy, etc.? Smarter. Like these apps, like you're talking, have the ability to make us a lot smarter, at least a lot more educated. But I think with some of these tech interventions you're talking about, perhaps cognition will get boosted a bunch too. And, who knows? That might be a good thing. I've also seen people with out of control cognition that's like probably detrimental to their lives. So it's like, what is that healthy, optimal balance? And I think this is what the territory we're still defining, right?
Yeah, I will say too that Jane McGonigal is a great one to look up if people are interested in
she had some TED Talks about video gaming, right?
Yeah, and she's done a few really great books. The one I just read was Reality is Broken. But yeah, she's incredible, and she talks about exactly what you're chatting about, like, the amount of hours spent collectively for humanity on a game like World of Warcraft is like I don't know, I think it's in the billions of hours. And then she extrapolates that into like what could, be possible with that much time if humanity spent that collectively focused on one thing. But yeah, and she's really much focused on games for good as well, and gamification, which she calls, instead of gamification, because that's kind of been bastardized by like credit card companies that give you extra points or miles. It's like not a credit system. It's actually what she calls like a gameful world, which is sending people on quests and inspiring people to do things for the betterment of humanity. So yeah, she'd be a really great one for people to check out if they are interested in that. And I will say too that it's interesting, coming back to psychedelics. One of the things that I heard recently, I forgot where I heard it, but it was like, so it'll be very hard to make virtual reality indistinguishable from reality. There always will be a issue with that. But if you were to take a psychedelic, or if somebody was to manufacture a drug that you take before going into the virtual world with full haptics, gloves, a Omni treadmill that allows you to run in any direction, then that might actually break through that. So there's like this combination effect of like, where are we going with the escapism route when technology becomes so immersive and psychedelics become legal and are manufactured for, MDMA that doesn't give you a hangover, or mushrooms that only last for 3 hours. Like, someone's going to produce a drug that will make VR even more intense and more indistinguishable. So that's a very interesting combination as well to look at into the future. I don't see it being very far off to like maybe 15 years.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, and you're in it. You're living this pretty daily, so you see this. And years ago, probably similarly 5 years ago, I saw a talk given by students from Naropa in Boulder at a kind of psychedelic conference Daniel McQueen from Medicinal Mindfulness was hosting, and they talked all about hypnosis and psychedelics and VR and psychedelics. And I think that was way ahead of its time. Like, we can barely still talk coherently about it today, as a culture at least. But there's definitely people who've been thinking about it for a long time. Terence Mckenna. Do you recall the Terence McKenna talk he gave talking about his kind of utopian vision of, no real industry happening on Earth? Like, a lot of our travel and heavy stuff happens in VR, but we're just kind of like walking pleasurably naked through the wilderness. And the whole world is just a nature habitat, but at any moment you can kind of jack in to the network and have access. I find that fascinating. I don't really know what to do with it, but
yeah, one of my favorite quotes is by Terence, which is, "The drugs of the future will be computers, and the computers of the future will be drugs." So he's pretty spot on, man. That guy was definitely using psychedelics to become pretty prophetic throughout his career.
Yeah, it's like even Timothy Leary was really interested in virtual reality and games. And what is that these kind of thought leaders way back were on this and really interested in this, in the nexus of tech and psychedelics.
I think
maybe
that
they saw it as a democratizing force.
I mean, I think there's probably a million reasons, right? But I think there is like this cultural engineering aspect, like just the power of these two things, technology and psychedelics, and its ability to shift culture. That's probably like the biggest one, And I think there's also like this world building aspect too. So like when people ask me what my art form is, I would say that I'm a world builder. And so, what that looks like inside of video games and virtual reality is like actually building simulations of different worlds that you create. And I think that also in the psychedelic world, you're building worlds as well, whether it's in your own mind or it's through ceremony and ritual. Like those are little microcosmic worlds. So I think that there's that aspect as well.
February 2019, Phoenix Psychedelic Conference, I got the chance to try microdose VR.
Mm-hmm.
My heart rate went up like massively within like 15 seconds.
Yeah,
Like,
my
so
publishing company
fascinated.
Andromeda actually helped fund that project with Android.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Do you have any opinions on it? Like it's obviously like a kind of a different approach than what you're talking about, but also a really interesting tool.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing. Yeah, for the listeners that don't know, it's essentially like Google Brush, which is like probably like the top, or Google Paint. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it's one of like the top VR apps where you literally just walk around and you could just paint in the sky. Like you could grab brushes and do crazy 3D models and stuff, and like physically walk around the world as you're painting. So microdose is essentially that, except with Android Jones graphics. So you could like change your brush into the head of a dragon, and so you'll paint a dragon that's like moving through the air, or they have like all these particle effects. So then you could like switch your brush into like these crazy kaleidoscope particles, and you could also like not only paint them, but then you could minimize yourself or enlarge yourself to make the world very small, or you become very little inside of it. So it's basically like a massive psychedelic universe of art and painting. Yeah, I mean, I think it's beautiful. I think it's an amazing project. I really hope they bring it to mobile VR because it's currently still in PC VR. I think it would be a huge hit. Yeah, for people that don't know, I think the PC VR, which means that it's tethered to a high-powered gaming computer, which Android and his team love because then the fidelity of the experience is very high resolution. But I think that makes up maybe 5% of the VR market now. Like pretty much everyone has switched to a mobile VR headset. So I'm really hoping that they port it over because I think it would be a huge hit. But yes, I do love it. And I think that's more of like the creative flow. I've never done it with psychedelics. I think that would be probably pretty special. But I think it's an amazing concept. I love that Android's always trying to bring his work to the world in unique ways.
Yeah. I was at a bicycle day event in San Francisco the other day, and they had it being projected across multiple screens behind the artists, and it's pretty sweet. I don't know the degree to which it was live performance or pre-recorded or anything. I did see a guy with the headset on a few times, like doing stuff, but yeah, I love that application for like supplementing, like value add to like a live performance. Yeah. There's a lot of room for experimentation here. There's so much open territory.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
that's
one of the reasons why.
Yeah, I mean, I can drop some cool examples for the listeners too, just so they know. So yeah, I mean, one of the experiences that I really like is called Deep VR. It's this creator named Owen, and basically it's a breathwork experience. So this is relevant for you as well. And essentially, you're wearing a little strap that measures your diaphragm, and as you inhale and exhale, you swim through this universe. So you're literally like deep sea diving, and the only controller is your head movement, and then your breath. So wherever you're looking, you will move based off of how much you're breathing and how deep you're breathing. So that one's very therapeutic and very entertaining. Yeah, and then for like the more practical, like for people, for instance, that have parents that suffer from chronic pain, or maybe they do, Applied VR is the first FDA-regulated VR experience, and that is specifically for chronic pain and pain management. So that one is, I always refer to friends and parents of
what was it called again?
Friends. Applied VR.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And then, yeah, I mean, there's a variety of there's another company called Reducept, which they're based out of the Netherlands, and they're also our chronic pain application in VR. So if you liked one more than the other, yeah, I mean, there's just like a lot of really cool stuff coming online. And I'm always tracking it. Oh, a really great one to download on your phone. Also, speaking of the breath, is an app called Breathscape. It's incredible. It's done by these two developers. They're one of them, Alexander, is like a former NASA scientist, and I think it's free. Just looking at my phone right now.
Mm,
And so you download Breathscape, you put the phone on your diaphragm, and it's instant biofeedback. So you could lay down, put on your headphones, and the soundscape changes based off of your diaphragm breathing. So you literally just it uses the gyroscope on your phone. It's super simple
amazing.
and incredible. Yeah, really, really helpful app. Um, yeah, so
They've
those
got
are
some
just a
stuff from
few
here and like
examples.
John Kabat-Zinn. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing, right? Like people, if you have like software chops, like check this stuff out, see if you love it. Maybe you see an obvious uh, uncharted zone, and you can check that stuff out too. Like there's so much room here. Software is interesting because it moves faster than culture moves.
Mm,
Um, it can have really outsized effects. You know, if you look at crypto, like people are freaking out because of the outsized effects it could have that are unpredictable and uncontrollable. And it's kind of why I like it so much. But you know, there in software, like I've spent so much time in software partly because I saw how much it could impact the way we operate on the planet. Like I was at the super boring company, but I was like happy because we were augmenting people's use of paper in offices. It's like, oh, cool. Like you now have to use half the paper or quarter the paper because you have all this tech that can cut that shit out.
right.
Um, yeah. So paired with biohacking and iteration and yeah, like we can prototype software so fast now. It's crazy. And it can be
Mm-hmm.
with people like the next day or same day really. Um, yeah, it's fascinating. Like, do you have an IT or like programming background?
I actually don't know. So I'm like the evangelist slash business development slash strategist, all the things outside of actually programming. I do spend a
Awesome.
lot of time, with Unity and Unreal developers and learning as much as I can. But I'm very much like, yeah, give them feedback, give them my thoughts and vision of what it could look like, and then obviously like work within their parameters. So yeah, I do a lot of. I'm a guinea pig for a lot of these things too, which I enjoy thoroughly.
That's great. Somebody does have to guinea pig. Uh, it's what a term. I actually just thought about that for the first time. Actually, using them as test pilots is fascinating. But really, yeah, it's something that needs to be done. Animals can't really share too much about their experience with us, but humans can. Um, Kind of puts me on the edge of being unethical in some people's eyes. But I think when we're dealing with like digital tools, like we don't necessarily need as much approval as when we're dealing with drugs. We can just build it and test it on our own. And
Yeah,
hell yeah, I love that.
yeah. I'm like, and then I think that another big thing that that I feel obligated to mention is that lucid dreaming. So I've been like very into controlling my dream world for the my entire adult life really since I was like 18. And yeah, I think that some of the more interesting software applications will be actually tapping into things like that, like something like an Aura ring. There's a guy that gave a TED talk and he had some like prototype app that didn't work at all, but I love the concept, which was essentially that in real time your either your Apple Watch or Aura Ring or whatever is monitoring your sleep cycles can basically do like in the movie Inception, where it plays music based off of you dropping into your REM sleep in real time, which would then cue your brain that you're in a dream and you could lucid dream. Um, Similarly, in a lighter sleep, it could play music that drops you into a deeper sleep, and then when you're about to wake up with your alarm or with the sunrise, then it'll play music to slowly bring you out of a deeper sleep into a waking state. So,
Damn.
so things like that, I would be very, very interested in, and I think that lucid dreaming is the ultimate virtual reality. So, if that was a possibility in the near future, I would really want to get behind a project like that. But I think that's kind of where a lot of this is heading: is how do we enhance the real world. Because ultimately, you look at things like light therapy, and that's very similar to, you know, taking the positive rays from the sun. Float spas are very similar to laying on the back on your back in the ocean. You know, cold plunging, like saunas, all of these things are just like amplifying what the earth already gives us. So I'm very interested in how we could continue to do that. And I think that's one of the better ways to ethically progress with technology.
I love it. Yeah. Lyle, I love this. Thank you so much. I can't wait to learn more. I'll keep you posted. I'm not really like I've only had some really basic VR tech, like the things that mount your phone to it.
Oh
But
wow. Oh yeah, we'll have
I
to get
might
you
have to
plugged
scoop
in.
up an Oculus. Yeah. I hate to give Zuck any money, but whatever. It's only till the second generation better companies are available. If that's going to happen, we'll see.
There's a lot.
I'm
There's a
sorry,
lot of
Zuckerberg, if I
companies
hurt your
coming
feelings.
for sure.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Well, any links you want to throw out, resources for people to check out?
Sure. Yeah. You could go to entheo.digital, is the website. And then my education VR platform that we're actually about to launch on Quest, is called geniusx.com. The app's actually called Retreat, but the parent company is GeniusX. And then you can find me on LinkedIn is usually the best for me, but on socials, I'm Luminous Lyle. And, yeah, it was great to be here, man. You got me all fired
Yeah,
up for
Lyle,
my
I
day.
really appreciate it. Yeah, hell yeah. Let's hang out for a minute here and, yeah, debrief. Thanks again.